You're listening to The Edge with Mark Thompson.
Edge-show.com. Stupid. Why is that dash?
Edge-show.com.
I'm having trouble keeping track of all the great documentaries that are coming out. There's a Mr. Rogers documentary that it seemed the world saw, and Netflix did that docu-series called Wild Wild Country that was terrific. But one of the big hits of the year is a Netflix docu-series in 4 parts called Evil Genius, the true story of America's most diabolical bank heist. And this is the weirdest, truly most bizarre crime that's followed by even more bizarre criminal events. And by that I mean, at the center of this thing is a bank heist, and we'll lay it out for you in this episode. Guy walks into a bank and he's got a bomb attached to him. It's just this insane scenario, and the banknote itself, it has a certain insanity to it. And then the story unfolds, and there what looks like sort of a scavenger hunt type thing associated with it, and then a body found in a freezer. And so as you're seeing this story told, the question becomes who's behind it and can they be brought to justice? It's an unwieldy story because there's so many moving parts, but director Barbara Schroeder brings it all together in what I think is a riveting docuseries on Netflix. So Barbara joins us to take us through the story and some of the process associated with that story. We start with Michael Shore. Michael has just returned from the road. He's been reporting on midterm elections, and he will share some of his thoughts on that. We talk about the elections in America and how increasingly it seems as though they're being undercut by everything from gerrymandering to closing polling places to subverting the voting process with voting machines. And then, of course, the president hosts the Christian right at a big dinner. Essentially, it's a state-type dinner, just minus the head of state. So we'll touch on that, and again, the power of the Christian right, the importance of the Christian right, how they're getting everything they want from this administration. We'll touch on that, too, toward the end of our conversation with Michael. You know, the thing that's hardest to do every episode is the pitch, for asking you to support us. And I know all the different shows do it, but it's still very, very hard for me. So I'm not going to do it at the top of the show this time. I'm going to drop it in the middle before we begin our segment with Barbara Schroeder. But I do want to thank you for sharing and subscribing. It is very helpful to us to grow audience that way. It has to be a grassroots thing. We started the show 5 years ago, and I thought everybody had a podcast 5 years ago. And now it turns out there are more everybody's than I had conceived of, because truly there are so many more podcasts than there were 5 years ago. And so I am even more grateful than I was 5 years ago for your subscriptions, for your positive reviews. If you go to iTunes and you just put in a 5-star rating and even 2 words saying, love it, catch it when I can, whatever. It does help us in the increasingly crowded queue that is the iTunes universe and the Stitcher universe and that kind of thing. Even iHeartRadio, where we have been for a while now they are beginning to increase their podcast footprint. So the good news is podcasts are increasingly mainstream, but the bad news is there's a lot of podcast noise. So we have to try to stand out as best we can and bring you what we think are interesting conversations and different conversations about a variety of subjects. All right, that's it. Preamble over. Thank you for being here. Let's get started.
This is The Edge.
The advantage, it means.
They let guy just spit on me for no reason.
That's horrible.
Is there some comfort in uncertainty, do you think?
You're a degenerate.
Because Australian Shepherds need action.
Wow. Yeah.
This is The Edge.
That's a self-loathing term that I use.
Oh, got it.
Edge-show.com. Edge-show.com. The hyphen is stupid. Edge-show.com.
Time for the Fast 15, politics and more. He's back from the road. We love him. He's Michael Shore. Yeah.
Hey, everyone. It's good to be here. Man, I have missed The Edge. I really have.
Well, we have missed you back, Michael. Where have you been?
I've been everywhere, man. I've been most recently, honestly, it sounds so rote and ridiculous to say that you don't, because whenever you hear rock stars say it, I don't remember where that show was. But I know that I was in Fresno. I was sort of local this week because I was in Fresno doing a story. I was in Orange County in San Diego doing similar stories, and prior to that, I was in New York on assignment. So I've been around, but it's really gearing up now for the midterms. Going to be a busy 10 weeks or
Yeah,
so.
look, politics is your beat. So what's happening out there? You're coming from Central California. That's Devin Nunes country?
Yeah, I was in the San Joaquin Valley. That's Devin Nunes country. It's Kevin McCarthy country to a degree, in part. He wants to be Speaker of the next House or leader of his party. So there's a lot happening there. I was covering the Andrew Jan's race. He's the one who's challenging Devin Nunes. And, it's interesting. We know if you're in Maine or you're in Louisiana, you have an image of Devin Nunes, whether you like it or not, as protecting the president and being intransigent on a lot of these Intelligence Committee issues. In his district, all they want to talk about is the water table and the aquifer and their farmers, and that's all they care about. Some of them didn't even know that he was on the Intelligence Committee, which, the old maxim that everybody gets tired of. Yeah, everybody gets tired of that, but it's true. Devin Nunes is in Washington with that job because he has been, in the estimation of farmers, good for them on water. Now,
has he been?
Well, yes and no. That's a great question because that's what his reputation is, and he has cemented that. He came up with good ideas. He made it an issue. He has pushed it. He's got nothing done in his almost 16 years in Congress. And so, yes, he's been good, but it's hard then to get a Congress in Washington to vote on issues that are local to Devin Nunes. So he hasn't been effective in getting the federal government involved in protecting the aquifer, allowing farmers to use surface water. The surface water is pushed out to sea, mostly because of environmentalists protecting the delta, protecting smelt, which was a fish that environmentalists wanted to protect, and California salmon. On the other hand, California salmon, they haven't been able to do anything to build their population up, and the environmentalists have had 40 years. So you see the other side of that coin too, which is, listen, that's not working either. Let us have the money to farm. We need this. America gets its crops from this valley. We need this water, but let's also work with you to create brackish water where salmon can breed in a different way, because that hasn't worked. And they have a point there too.
Wow. So the water table issue, that is to say, when companies like Nestle come in and they stick a pipe in the ground and they just pump out water, that's not necessarily the issue that voters in that district are concerned with, at least. Okay.
It's not. This is all about farming. This is about the farmers having to dig their wells deeper and deeper and deeper in search of water, finding water, and the water they're finding is sometimes causing the land to collapse because they're draining the aquifer. And we've had drought, and this year was great for the farmers.
I guess I just read so much about the fact that they're having to dig deeper and deeper because of the corporate grab that has gone on with these ridiculous California water laws. I mean, these companies, oddly, aren't doing anything illegal. They're doing things that should be illegal because you shouldn't be able to just come in, stick a pipe in the ground, pump out whatever you want, and pull the truck out.
Yeah.
But I thought that was having an impact there. But you're saying it might be having some kind of universal impact.
Exactly, or a statewide, quote-unquote, global state issue. But it's nothing that any of these farmers that I met with, and of course it's always anecdotal, but that's the only way you can cover this. You speak to as many people as you can and get their opinions. And then across the board, everybody is talking about water. Andrew Jan's, his challenger, is talking about water. And he's basically saying he's had a chance to do something. What he wants to do isn't necessarily wrong, but we have to look at it with new eyes.
So that seat, although challenged, is it likely to be toppled?
It's not a flip the House seat. I mean, it's a Republican seat. It's a Republican district. It's not anything that the Democrats nationally are saying, listen, if we lose the Nunes seat, we're out of here. The fact that it's even in play to the degree that it is most notable. He hasn't had a challenge in any of his races where some have been unopposed, but the ones where he's been challenged, they've gotten just a minimal amount of support. Now the fact that this is inside of 8 points is notable. They just have to find the Democrats there, and that's going to be tough. Into the flip the House races, I was in Darrell Issa's district the other day talking to Mike Levin, who's running for that seat as a Democrat, Diane Harkey, who's running as a Republican.
This is in California,
California, yeah. This is part of the plan. There are certain seats that have to be flipped. When America looks toward California to do their part, because they have a lot of Democratic power here now, they're counting on 3 of these seats to flip. And any of the 5 or 6 districts that are in play, if they can flip 3 of them, then they're going to be, that will mean a good night. So I went down to this race because there's no incumbent, and I wanted to see what they're doing, how Diane Harkey's dancing around Donald Trump and Darrell Issa, and how Mike Levin is dancing around Nancy Pelosi to a degree, but more so how he's using Donald Trump as an issue or not, what the choice is in doing that. And it's interesting.
What's happening with Dana Rohrabacher?
Well, I mean, the Dana Rohrabacher race is probably...
He's also, to tell everybody who doesn't live in California or maybe aware, he's a California guy, close ties to the Russians, typically pointed to when Dana Rohrabacher's name comes up. He's a friend to this administration, et cetera.
Right. So Rohrabacher's race is going to be his toughest ever. Duncan Hunter is someone who Rohrabacher was tight with. Now Duncan Hunter Jr. is in a lot of water in the 50th, hot water in the 50th district for real reasons.
We'll come back to that, but this is huge.
Yeah. So it's going to be difficult for Rohrabacher to win that seat. And it's
it
a
is.
seat. Yeah, I think that's one of the ones that Democrats feel are going to be a headline that night. And as you move from east to west on an election night, you're going to see chips falling if they're going to for the Democrats. It's going to make it a lot less impactful for Republicans to come out and vote, although they're more reliable in midterm elections.
I see. So you're saying that in some of these races we're speaking of in California, some people may not even leave the house, given
right. I mean, that's typically
leave where they live. I mean, when I say
right,
the house.
right, yeah, that's true. And so what a lot of people think when they they always say turnout is crucial. Well, a lot of people think that Republicans turn out more than Democrats. There are different voters voting now than have typically, and a lot of those old beliefs are thrown out the window. You have Republicans who never voted before Trump. You have independents who voted for Trump who are now interested in voting. And this jungle primary, which was supposed to sort of protect some of these people, has become a very difficult thing for Republicans when they thought it was going to give them a little bit more leeway, where the top two finishers in a primary then move on. So it's going to be interesting.
Well, I'm going to come to do the Duncan Hunter thing last.
Okay.
I first want to stop you right here because of what you said. You're talking about voter turnout, all these things that affect the election and the kind of voters who are turning out and how they turn out and what numbers. And I can't help but be struck by one of the things that weighs on me, and that is that the system of voting in America, I think, is losing legitimacy. And by that I mean the entrance into this entire voting process of voting machines that they will not allow you to audit. They will not allow you to look at after the fact, because they claim it's proprietary intellectual property or something along those lines.
Yeah.
Similarly, of course, we've talked about gerrymandering before on the show, but the voter suppression, I would call it, when they close down polling places, that is the places that are available to the public to vote. Those are just a couple of the things.
But they're really important.
Yeah,
I mean, they're just you don't need more than one of them, and you have two, and then you have three, and then you have four reasons why there's a problem with voting in America.
And I might just quickly add, because on the voting machines, the voting machine company, Diebold, is closely associated with the Republican right.
Yeah.
That is to say, they really do have a political interest in the outcome of these races.
No question.
And then on top of that, not allow the auditing.
Right.
So I'm sorry. So now, with that said, give me a moment on that, because I'm really concerned. I'm seriously, the democracy it's always going, well, we still can go out and you can vote and you can turn out. I think increasingly, I don't know what's going to happen in that process.
Well, I mean, I think, here's the thing. The optimist in me says because these conversations are not just happening on the edge and they're happening in lots of places means that, we may have been bamboozled and we're going to try and fix that. So just because it is that way doesn't mean that that's the sort of the natural track of where it's going to go. I think that there are people out there who are fighting this and more vocally than they had in the past. Everybody thought that after Bush v. Gore in 2000 that, we're going to change the way we vote in the country, and it didn't do that, right? I mean, the paper ballots there were actually what the problem was, so it was very difficult for those who were advocating for a paper trail to say, this is a good way of doing it. Because
because you're saying certain ballots were not readable because they were in that in-between stage. Like
exactly.
The punch wasn't all the way through.
Chad, you remember the hanging chads? Well, if this is through and it wasn't separated, then we're going to... I mean, that just seemed so arcane at the time that that's how we voted in the age of technology. Well, now technology is here, and technology isn't helping in that it doesn't give us the paper trail. So there's something in between, and I think people are starting to sit down and talk about that now. And yes, I mean, you can't look at Diebold and not say, hey, listen, this company is in the pocket of Republicans. Ken Blackwell, who was the Secretary of State of Ohio, who really sort of was someone who's pushing that, was a very partisan guy. And I do think that you're never going to get perfect, right? And this isn't about perfect. This is about transparent. I think you're going to get more transparent.
I hope you're right. I mean, there's certainly those who would say, hey, Al Gore won that election. But
well, that's because he did.
Right. Okay. So there's that, right?
And I think more people in the state of Florida went out to vote for Al Gore than did for George Bush. And because of the Chads, because of the butterfly ballots, because of and a little of this is on us too. I mean, let's not just blame the people that are governing these elections. People have to wake up a little bit. We need to be a little bit more aware of how we vote, where we vote, when we vote, and be more involved. When you're talking about such a low turnout anyway in this country, what right do those people have to complain in a way? And I'm saying that from the standpoint of, yeah, I can complain about the ballots in Diebold, and I can complain about all these companies. But the truth is that not enough people are engaged anyway. So, we deserve what we get in a way.
Yeah, I guess, of course, I agree with you on one level, but I guess I'm getting in my head just the thought that, well, what are you looking for? A voter revolt? I mean, all they can do is, go, hey,
no,
this looks like...
I know that. I mean, and maybe more people will be engaged when it's fixed, and I'm an advocate for fixing it. I'm outraged by the situation. But I do think there's a little bit of a two-way street here. Maybe it's 3 lanes on the other side and 1 lane on this side. But there is some responsibility we have, and the more people that are engaged and voting, then the more, reason they would have to complain about the way it is, and it doesn't, listen, not everybody's a tennis fan, but the tennis fans want the rules to be good. So I understand that. Not everybody votes, but the people who vote want their vote to count. There is that. And I'm not in any way diminishing that notion. But I don't think it's a separate conversation. But I do think that our electorate here isn't as involved as they should be. And when you go and cover this stuff like I do, and you're in a room of 7, people asking questions of a candidate, or you're in a room of 1,000 people at a banquet listening to a congressman, you see how cool it is when people are involved and what a difference it can make.
I see. That is interesting. You're saying that, you're seeing it in a way that most of us don't, which is the dynamic that the electorate has with and constituencies have with the person in office. That's the other problem, and then we can move on. I do want to get to Duncan Hunter. The incentive maybe isn't there for those who are incumbents, and those are the guys, and I mean that generically, the men and women who are going to change the legislation.
Right. Yeah, they also don't have time to deal with it once they're incumbents, as crazy as that may sound. It's not an excuse either. When you see members of Congress have to run every 2 years in order to stay in office, all they're doing is running all the time. And to get into the weeds on this stuff is much better handled, I think, by advocacy groups and a couple of them who can come out and talk to you. But, incumbency, it does make you lazy in some ways, too. And it's too bad. I don't know how avoidable that is, though.
Well, I was feeling better when you were first talking about this, and now I'm not feeling so good. If that they don't even have time to address it.
Well, I mean, I'm saying I, when it gets before them, I'm talking about doing the grassroots advocacy.
Right, but it takes some advocacy to get it to the point.
It does,
where
and there are a few that are doing that, but I don't think you're going to see a wave of members of Congress doing that. You see Democrats complain about it. You actually see them. They're much more about voter suppression and voting rights and gerrymandering. That's the stuff they can actually control and impact more than the paper trail on Diebold machines,
Right.
So I do think that there's, people will pick up the slack, and not everyone's going to be interested in everything either.
Tell us about Duncan Hunter. He's now in a world of trouble.
Yeah.
He's a congressman from California.
Right. There's a Slim Dusty song from Australia called "I'd Love to Have a Beer with Duncan," which is just a great song. The that's my Duncan
Michael
Hunter
Shore
aside,
with the master
and
of
trivia. To be frank, I would not love to have a beer with Duncan Hunter, although he'd pay for it apparently.
Pay for it with campaign.
Yes, exactly.
Funds.
Well, I don't care if I'm having the beer.
Right. So I don't care where the money comes
Yeah,
from.
well, whatever you want, Dunk. But very seriously, Duncan Hunter is under indictment now. He's the son of Duncan Hunter, who represented that district for a long time. He has allegedly abused his campaign funds for travel, for gifts, for bars and burgers, and his wife was part of that, it seems. His wife, who he is almost blaming for it, which is odd. And he is in a solidly Republican district, and he's running against a man named Amar Campa-Najjar, who is he's a Mexican-American whose grandfather was one of the assassins in the Munich Olympics, which has no bearing on the race at all. I just think it's an interesting fact.
That is an interesting fact.
And he, of course, says it's his grandfather. He's right. It has nothing to do with his politics or who he is. He's a very progressive. He was endorsed by the California Democratic Party, but it's an uphill fight even even with these allegations against Duncan Hunter, to show you the habitual voting and the tribal voting that is done. This hasn't been polled since Hunter was in trouble, but it certainly helps the candidacy of Najjar.
The deal with Hunter is, here's a guy who on paper really looked amazing, right? I mean, after 9/11, I think he quit his job. He goes over to Iraq.
Yeah.
I mean, he served with multiple tours. And the reason that this is even more galling is because with that profile, you'd expect that he would, take up for veterans or perhaps be a veteran advocate. And
10% of that district is veterans.
And he did those things, but then as it turns out, he's putting charges of the sort that you described, for meals, for trips, for this and that, billing it to the Wounded Warrior Project.
Well, I wouldn't. It's not as direct as that. What happened was, and again, this is all alleged, so we should stick that in. But he was getting some things at going golf clothes, and he said to his wife that he was going to do it, and she said, well, don't worry about that. Put it down as golf balls for the Wounded Warriors. So in other words, whatever he was buying at the golf store, he would put down and say that she was suggesting he write it off to the Wounded Warriors, or say it was to the Wounded Warriors. Whether or not that happened, whether or not he did it, we don't know yet, but there are lawyers who know, and we'll find out soon enough.
Well, what he was buying were these golf things, but he was spending campaign funds.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Okay.
That should be. That's what's alleged, is that the money was
right.
from campaign funds, and the campaign funds, his wife was suggesting he should say, went to the Wounded Warriors.
Right. That was the way she was suggesting a cover. Like, don't worry about the fact that it's campaign money. We'll just say it was for the Wounded Warriors Project.
Exactly.
So yes, it wasn't coming from Wounded Warrior money. It was being disguised as Wounded Warrior money.
Exactly.
Anyway, he's been indicted.
And we'll see now. I mean, he's staying in the race. He was Paul Ryan removed him from all his committee assignments, which is something that you have not seen Paul Ryan do at all in past transgressions by members of Congress. He was under ethics investigation already. If he loses, it will probably just go to the courts, and that'll be the end of it. If he wins, there will be a drawn-out problem that the Republicans in Congress next session will have as to how to deal with him.
By the way, they went to a Steelers game also, Duncan Hunter. He and the family went to a Steelers game. That cost a few $1,000.
Right.
And again, these are the kinds of things.
Well, they went to Italy. They went to Hawaii. And there's $600 for transit costs for a pet rabbit.
Oh, that's right. Thank you. I buried the lead. That's like the oddest.
It's the oddest thing. And
oddly, the most respectable, I think.
And what it means, you would think that. But what it means to me is they took the curious part of this means that they took their rabbit to Italy, because Hawaii has quarantine for animals. So you couldn't take a rabbit into Hawaii unless they took a rabbit to the Steelers game. That rabbit went to Italy.
Wow.
This is just me.
So as we finish up, John McCain has just died.
He has.
I wasn't even going to spend a minute on it, not because he doesn't deserve a minute spent on him, but they've spent so many minutes on talking about his death. But then as we record this, there is controversy of the moment, which is that the White House didn't have the flags that have staff there.
Right.
Which you would do for a guy who's got this lifetime of service, military and political, to the United States of America. But Trump hates the guy.
Trump hates the guy. Trump wanted to have the White House put out a statement on the passing of McCain. Yeah. Trump has reportedly at that time said, no, I'll just send a tweet. He didn't want anything official. He's not invited to the funeral. He will not be a part of that. Mike Pence will be going. Joe Biden's going to be going to and speaking in Arizona, and former Presidents Bush and Obama will be speaking at the funeral. So there won't be anything presidential there. Today he was asked by 4 different reporters questions in the Oval Office. He heard them and ignored them when he was asked about John McCain, particularly to ABC's John Carl.
Tonight at the White House, there is an evangelical Christian dinner.
Which is why I have to leave early.
And I am reminded of the conversation we had on this program about the power of the evangelical right in this administration. And we were talking about it in relation to the Jerusalem embassy. But people may want to go back and...
We've talked about it in relation to Brett Kavanaugh, too.
That's right.
And Supreme Court justices. Before that, we talked about it with Neil Gorsuch.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. We've mentioned it several times. And to have it all out in the open like this...
Well, there was nothing secret about it. He's in the White House because of the evangelicals.
When I say out in the open, I mean to have it celebrated with a dinner at the White House. The myth of the Christian oppression in this country is a powerful one. The myth of a war on Christmas. These things perpetuate perpetuate a culture war that's totally built on lies.
And bravo to the Christian right, because they're getting every single thing they want. They have no complaints. They made a quid pro quo with this president in Iowa when he was running. They made a quid pro quo with him when he said, grab him by the pussy. At every single point, they have said, give us what we want, and we will support you. Look at Franklin Graham. Look at Focus on the Family. Look at John Hagee in Texas. Everything that's happened that they want, they've gotten because they have this guy by the strings.
That's exactly right. And it's a good deal.
Well, it's a great deal for them. They're getting if anyone in politics got everything they wanted, it never happens except for this. They deserve all the credit in the world. People should use them as a model because of what they've been able to squeeze out of this president.
Yeah. Wonder what they're serving. Wonder if that's available.
The
anymore.
Lord God.
Yeah, that's right. We all serve the Lord. Michael, I love seeing you. It's great that you spend time with us. I know it's a pain in the ass, so thank you.
It's never a pain in the ass to be here. I look forward to it every time.
Michael Shore, everybody! Come
Thanks,
on!
everybody. Thank you. Oh, it's good to be back. Good to see you all again.
Before we get into producer-director Barbara Schroeder, who tells the story of bringing this riveting series, Evil Genius, to the screen in a docu-series for Netflix, let me remind you that there are ways to support this show. We don't take any commercial sponsorships. You won't hear me read a commercial for boxed food or survivalist kits or anything else. But what you will hear me do is ask you to support this show by clicking through on our website, edge-show.com, on the Amazon link there, if you're going to shop on Amazon. I mean, if you're not going to shop on Amazon, then don't worry about it. But if you're going to, go to our website, edge-show.com, click anywhere you see the Amazon banner in any episode where it says Amazon, click on that Amazon link, and they, because you click through our site, will spin off a slight bit of whatever you spend on Amazon. Same Amazon you'd normally be on, doesn't change a thing on your end, but it does spin off a little bit to us. So that's one way you can support us. And of course, we have a PayPal link there. You can hit our virtual tip jar and make a contribution. There are people who send us $5 a month. And regardless of what you send, regardless of what provisions you make to do it monthly or whatever, we're so grateful. Every dollar stays with this podcast. And now the story of bringing the story to the screen. Barbara Schroeder talks about the project Evil Genius, the true story of America's most diabolical bank heist.
This is The Edge with Mark Thompson. You're listening to The Edge with Mark Thompson.
Welcome, producer Barbara Schroeder, to our little show.
Yes. Thank you. This is very exciting.
Barbara's a journalist and has a background in researching and reporting, and so doing this true crime thing had to be sort of right up your alley in a way.
Right.
Yeah.
Especially after getting all this material and then writing it and directing it was just a huge shift in just doing stories for local news, where Mark, you and I met years ago. Mark was my friendly weatherman sitting next to me. I used to pitch to you and you pitched back to me. Yeah, so we worked together.
Yeah, no, it's true. No, I mean,
have a history.
Barbara's really had, come up through the world of news and breaking news and all this stuff. And boy, this story that is in Evil Genius, the true story of America's most diabolical bank heist, that was the biggest breaking news story of I've got to think in that community ever, maybe.
Right. The number one crazy crime and the trial of the century.
Yeah.
After they got a few of the conspirators corralled.
I should have done this ahead of time, but J. Elvis Weinstein is here, and he's a documentary filmmaker. He's done 2 documentaries, and he's a comic, and one of his documentaries is about comedy in Asia.
Yes.
I just want you to know that he's not just some guy. He's also got some chops.
No, I'm a documentary maker.
And instant respect.
And Heather.
Can I loan you some money?
Please. Oh God, please.
And Heather Ankeny, this documentary, which comes, is it how many? 4 parts?
It's 4 parts.
Yeah.
I originally wanted to do 10, and Netflix said, "How about 4?" And I said, "Okay, I'll do 6." And they said, "How about 4?" I said, "Okay, 4."
This documentary series is right in Heather's sweet spot. I mean, you were to the true crime party before anybody else.
I don't know about anybody else,
but you love. I mean, really, you love this stuff.
Yes.
Yeah. And I never thought I was way into it, but I was riveted by this. Riveted. I watched it straight through
That's good to
every
hear.
episode. Now,
I'm not that into crime, but I love good storytelling, which this was.
Why, thank you. Yeah. Did you watch it all the way through?
I did.
Okay.
I'm really interested to get this.
Yeah.
I can't wait to hear what you have to say because you had to put this story together.
Yeah, wrote this story a lot of times, a lot of different ways, and there were a lot of rabbit holes to fall down because there's so many tangents and so many sub-stories, and it's not just one poor pizza delivery man who was publicly executed. Then there's another, I mean, it just goes on and on. A lot of what I call wait, what moments?
Yeah. So let's play a little bit of the trailer and let everybody hear what we're talking about. This is the trailer of Evil Genius, the true story of America's most diabolical bank heist.
911, we just been robbed.
We got him out of the car and cuffed him.
I started hearing a beat. His eyes just got real wide.
A potential hostage sent into the bank with an explosive around their neck. Something like this had never happened before in the history of the FBI.
For being a small town, Erie has its share of bizarre events, but there is nothing that raised so many questions as this case.
The call was made to the pizza shop at 1:30. Brian Wells drove to the site where the pizzas were to be delivered.
The man told police that he was forced to rob the bank.
The FBI believe that whoever built the caller is patient and secretive.
Brian Wells said he was supposed to go on a scavenger hunt.
And he was supposed to go from point A to point B to point C, where the keys would be given him to release this bomb.
This made worldwide news.
The purpose of the pizza bomber plot? Money.
How could this happen? Who's the mastermind?
Please, what's your emergency?
There's a woman that you might want to question.
He's the one that did it. He and his co-conspirators.
There was a lot of tips coming in, but no smoking gun.
We didn't have DNA, fingerprints.
The bomb had wires that didn't mean anything to prevent the bomb squad from tampering with it.
Do you make the bomb?
No.
Liar.
It's a bank robbery, but it's a scavenger hunt. Guy has a cane gun, and it was actually loaded.
Who put this in motion?
I did nothing.
Who actually said, hey, let's rob a bank?
She laughed about it. She says, I got away with it.
Was Wells a victim or participant?
When you have a bomb up to your neck,
It became a diabolical game to them.
It's just unreal.
And a one-of-a-kind crime, so much so that the FBI designated it, rare designation, an FBI major case, which is reserved for like 9/11 and Oklahoma City bombings. But this was such a confounding case that they said, we got to throw all our resources at it, so it got that major designation.
But despite all their resources, Barbara, I don't want to give too much away, although the trailer does sort of tip off that it's a wider conspiracy and even shows you pictures of, who's involved.
Yeah.
But despite them designating it that way, it seems as though they weren't able to really uncover things quickly enough to really get to the truth about this bizarre situation.
Right, that whole first 48 hours thing is when that time period when you can solve a crime. That didn't happen here. In fact, it became a long, extended investigation. And if you talk to state police in the city of Erie, they will tell you, if it would have been with us, if it would have been a homicide investigation, we would have solved this in 2 weeks. But there was a lot of interdepartmental drama. There were other dead bodies involved in this story. So one of them that were all related. One of them was found in county territory. One of them was found in city territory. And then the bank robbery was an FBI case. So you have all these different agencies juggling and trying to get the case. And meanwhile, the perpetrators are slipping away. And like Bill Rothstein, one of the guys who was possibly the mastermind, he actually sat on his front porch and melted down a gun while the FBI was coming down the pathway next to him to go to the tower site where the pizza delivery guy made his last delivery. So the hubris of these criminals, they were just...
Yeah, they really felt as though they could get away with it, and they did in large measure.
Yeah, even to this day, technically it's a closed case, but we still don't know for sure who wrote these incredible bank hostage notes. There were 9 pages of hostage notes. Like you give one to the hostage, give one to the bank manager. There was a note for police to stand down if they, apprehend the robber.
The story begins, and that's one of the things I love about the way you've structured it. You don't slowly, in any kind of plodding way, introduce us to characters. You bring us right to this incredible crime. That is to say, the original bank heist, what happens? Guy walks into a bank.
Yeah, guy walks into a bank. He has on a T-shirt that says "Guess" on it, and it looks weird because it's covering something up, and people thought it was maybe one of those medical devices, like a Halo device. He walks up and he hands the teller a note that says, "Give me $250,000." It was detailed. It was a full page. I mean, as the reporter that Scott Brebner that we worked with, as he said, usually you just like say, "I've got a gun, give me all your money," but this was a long note, so he
in
gave
like
that.
tiny Unabomber scrawl.
Yes, yes.
It did look like a crazy person wrote the note.
Yeah, and there was one for bank manager and the bank teller. Like, this was very specific. So he asks for money. They don't have it. And he says, "Give me what you got." He gets about $8,000 out of the drawer, and he walks out, and people start calling 911. Somebody just walked out. And so then the state police show up, a cruiser shows up. They apprehend him, they take him down, handcuff him. And by the way, the dash cam video that you see in the first series, that was never broadcast before, and that was one of the first dash cams ever used.
Really?
Back in Erie in 2003, and it was color. So we were happy to find that when we could show how the troopers take him down and handcuff him, because they don't know what they have.
Sure.
Do we have a guy who was forced to do this, or do we have a guy who wanted to do this? Either way, they also needed to find out what was on him, if it was real or not.
And as it turns out, and this is how naive I am, I'm watching this thing and I'm thinking, well, this is all BS. The guy doesn't have a real bomb on. He's wearing this thing.
It's like giant handcuffs.
Yep,
Yeah.
giant handcuff around his neck.
Around his neck.
Welded to a box on his chest.
That was all machined by the perpetrator.
By one of them.
Yeah. But as I'm watching
Handmade, right.
I'm watching it, I'm thinking, there's no way that's a real bomb. This is all an elaborate
I remember when it was happening, and it was and I remember the actual. I don't remember any of the aftermath, so it's the perfect story where you remember this great image, and then don't remember what happened afterwards. But I remember like not believing that was real, and then he's dead.
Do you remember at the time thinking whether he was a bank robber or whether he was a hostage?
I assumed at the time he was a hostage.
Okay.
He looks like a hostage. I mean, I know the whole lollipop thing and the swinging of the
But he
cane.
had that the calmness of, "Why aren't you helping me?"
Well, you felt for this guy. Once you really get into the story,
Yeah.
you realize that he's just this unwitting guy who's been drawn into this.
Yeah.
So what happens is, as you say, they handcuff him, and they've apprehended him pretty quickly. I mean, it's 911. They get him. It's, the escape isn't something. So
And
they
there
get him.
didn't seem to be any plan for him not to be easily apprehended, really.
Right. And interestingly, if you look through all those notes, there wasn't a clear, specific hand off the money plan either.
Oh, really?
Which I always found interesting. It just said, tie an orange piece of tape that we've given you to this, this area here at Eyeglass World around this, little landmark, and then we will know that you have to signal us that you have the money. But it never said, give us the money. It never said, drop off the money or put the money somewhere. So that
Right.
was always intriguing to me that that wasn't in the notes. But they got him right before he was going to go to the first scavenger hunt site, which was that whole other level of heinousness and bizarreness to the story, which was this scavenger hunt that he was sent on to try to find the keys to unlock the bomb around.
That seemingly, even if had it gone without a hitch, wasn't sufficient amount of time to save his life.
Except for the fact that there were 2 cotter pins in the bomb, and one had been pulled. And that would have been pulled when Brian was at that, Brian Wells, the pizza delivery guy, was at that remote TV tower site, and he'd been ambushed. And they pulled it and said, go, it's a ticking time bomb now. There was another pin in for the second pipe bomb. If the troopers would have known about that when they apprehended him, if they could have pulled that, it would have given them another hour to live.
Okay.
Given him another hour to live.
But did it say in the note anywhere in the scavenger hunt, hey, you pull this pin, you get another hour?
No. And I don't know if Brian was told that, or if was he supposed to meet somebody at one of those scavenger hunt sites and they would have pulled that pin?
So what happens is, as Barbara was just saying, they apprehend this guy, they handcuff him, and then they realize, oh my God, this guy has a bomb on. They realize it, or he tells them. I mean, maybe they realize after he tells them. But the point is, it was weird to see the cops just completely back off. So now you've got a guy with a bomb on, supposedly, and he's handcuffed, and he's begging them to help get this thing off of him. And you realize no one's getting near that guy. And then the bomb squad they've called gets caught in the traffic because they've cordoned off so many streets that it's created a huge traffic jam, and the bomb people can't get to it.
And they were 3 to 4 minutes late. And Brian did live a little while after the implosion into his chest. So, and somebody brought up an interesting point the other day, a former FBI profiler who worked on this case very briefly. He said, if somebody could have put a bulletproof vest in between the bomb and his chest, they might have been able to mitigate the force.
Sure, but the minute they realized it was a bomb, they all ran like crazy.
Well, they seemingly didn't know if they had a criminal or a victim on their hands.
Yeah, which, Mark, I feel like my personal opinion was I didn't feel like he was begging them. It didn't feel maybe I
thought he said, "Get this off of me." Or
well,
something.
he was, but it was very calm.
It didn't feel desperate. It wasn't like, I don't know what's going on. I need your help. Get this off. He was more like, I think I don't have much time.
Yeah.
It wasn't like he was playing cat and mouse per se, but
I see. Yeah,
it didn't feel as desperate to me.
And you're right. The guy has just held up this bank, and you're right. You don't know whether he's a good guy or a bad guy type thing.
Yeah. And there's the question of whether he knew it was live or not. If he knew it was live, maybe he would have been yelling and screaming more. But then again, there's also his personality, which is he's very low-key, he's very simple. He was, a loner, and he was easy. He was, as a lot of people described him, a pushover. So, targeted for just that purpose, maybe.
So the bomb does go off, and he dies.
Can I ask you a question? I want to find out what you think you saw when it went off, because there's some conversation going on about how much of that explosion we used. Do you think you saw the whole thing? The whole explosion?
No, I felt like I saw one angle that was that was actually pretty. I mean, it showed that it happened without being incredibly graphic. I thought.
Great.
I thought I saw the whole thing. I felt like it was a handmade bomb that wasn't very sophisticated and did enough damage to kill him, but didn't blow his head off.
It's funny, you don't see it until the complete thing. You don't, and you'll pardon me for calling it this, but it's not paid off with the real shot. No, but really, I mean, look, everybody's curious. That's the reason people slow down at car accidents. They want to see what happened.
Yeah.
And so this thing goes off, and in the very final episode, you do see it go off, and you get a sense for the damage that it did. It wasn't insanely graphic, though. I mean, you see it from a distance.
A lot of people think that they saw the whole thing, but we actually blurred it. We blurred, but strategically, so that you see like a cloud or something. But there was a lot of discussion about that. Like, do we show it? Do we not show it? How much do we show?
I'm glad you blurred it.
Didn't want to. Yeah, we didn't want to use it gratuitously.
Well, and it's not. And you didn't want it to be the image that people walked away from the film.
Right, yeah.
And I thought you made a great storytelling choice, which was it had the impact of knowing the explosion happened without planting that image as the overriding thing.
And then we did use a photo that we heavily blurred at the end of that had never been publicly shown before of Brian's injuries. Okay. And that was just to reinforce the fact that this man was publicly executed and no one was charged with murder. Still an astonishing,
and as it turns out, we meet this cast of characters who are all connected to this.
Marjorie,
I don't
Bill,
think you could
Ken.
have cast them better than that.
I mean,
if you tried.
And they're all hoarders, right?
Yeah,
Every house we would see pictures of everybody's house, and then the next set of pictures. It's like it's like hoarders times 10.
Yeah, the one guy who is super connected to it takes the cops through the house, and you're right, he's stepping over stuff on his way to other stuff. Right. Those images and that story and how to tell those interlocking stories had to be a challenge, I would think.
It was. I'll confess to you, I wrote it probably 24 different times in 24 different ways. And we tried it without a narrator. We tried it with a narrator because my co-producer, co-director, Trey Borzolari, who brought the story to me after he had worked on it for 10 years.
Wow.
And then he just started, he was like citizen journalist, and he'd seen a documentary that he liked, and he thought, I'm always looking for one. So he finds this story, and he was at a bar watching the live coverage, and he started like following it just as a, like, I don't know anything about reporting, but I'll follow it. And he did a great job. His instincts were amazing. He couldn't find out information, so he started talking to some of the people that were involved, like this Bill Rothstein. He drove up to his house and knocked on the door and was like, "Hey, what can you tell me about this thing that you might be the mastermind of?" And so he brought it to me, and then that was about 5 years ago. And I thought, oh, this is the most confusing story I've ever heard, and it's not completely solved. And he said, well, I'd like you to write and direct it. And I said, well, I don't know, it's so confusing. And I thought about it for a couple days because it wasn't easy to tell. And then I went back to him and I said, if we can move the story forward and shoot all new video, because we've got to get good quality production here, And I thought, oh, we can tell this in a year. We'll be done in a year or a year and a half. No problem. I can write this. But then the story kept unfolding. And Trey had kept in touch with Jessica Hoopsick, who was one of the pivotal, sex worker / favorite prostitute of the pizza delivery guy. And she was getting ready to talk, maybe would talk, and then she talked. So it was like the story kept moving. And finally, like 5 years later, we had what we needed. And Netflix was the perfect landing spot for this because it's a great way to tell investigative journalism.
Yeah, and 5 years earlier.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, 5 years earlier, Netflix might not have been.
Right. That was pre-Making a Murderer. Yeah. Like, we are so indebted to that and The Jinx and, all those great shows that set the bar.
I was amazed that a pizza delivery guy could afford a prostitute.
Well, this is not big city.
I don't think she was very expensive.
This is not a big city prostitute.
Well, no, he paid with crack, actually.
He did.
Yeah.
He would drive to one of the other co-conspirators' houses and,
And it's funny how these references along the way, just like they always say in film, like no scene is completely superfluous. No character in this is completely superfluous. You think you've heard the end from someone, and then there's more to that vein of gold,
Speaking of which, the hooker, Jessica Hoopsick, sex worker / hooker / prostitute, she was just arrested a couple of days ago.
No way.
Because of an outstanding, she was supposed to post bail on a prostitution charge, and she didn't, so they arrested her. But in the headline, it said, prostitute featured in Netflix's Evil Genius arrested.
Wow. She has credits.
Yeah, and when she was arrested, the guy said, "Your name sounds familiar. Do I know you?" And she said, "Yeah, I'm starring in that show, Evil Genius."
Trying to get off.
Yeah. Real World, Part 12.
Don't you know who I am? Oh, you do know who I am.
Believe me, the camera adds 10 pounds.
Do you feel like the reception to this? Because the reception, universally people have loved this that I've talked to, and I've plugged it on my other podcast
thank
too.
you.
And,
Thank you.
And people wrote to me thanking me for hipping them to
sweet.
it.
Oh, great.
Do you feel like that Wild Wild Country helped it that they coexisted because one made the other hungry for the other kind of?
Right, and Wild Wild Country, how phenomenal. I mean,
awesome, yeah.
Insider information, although not that much inside. Mark Duplass and Jay Duplass, they were our executive producers, and they also found the Wild Wild Country. So they're onto something. They have really good taste, and he was.
How did they come on board?
Yeah, we have a sales agent in common with Mark, and our sales agent had taken us around town, and we did a song and dance for a lot of different networks, and there was interest. But Mark heard about it. He was sitting with his friend who was our sales agent. He says, "What? I want to do this. This is amazing." So he became our godfather, and I have to say, he is, talk about one of the good guys of Hollywood. That it's Mark Duplass and his brother Jay. We work mostly with Mark, but every time Mark has a success or has some kind of a hit, he shares the wealth, and he took us into Netflix, and had. It wasn't a huge financial gain. It was just, I think this is a great story, and he shares the spotlight. And
when he walks in, because of the track record, it's a different meeting.
Exactly. And the story, too. I have to give the story credit, because this was a one-of-a-kind story, and, we haven't had a good bank heist documentary in a long time.
You could have messed it up real good.
Josh is right.
I think I did on the first 23 versions.
Good job doing 24, because you really did a great job of storytelling.
Barbara, and I'm glad to hear that. Thank you for saying that, because we were worried, like, it is so confusing. That was my greatest fear, that how do I stay on the train track and keep people interested without taking them down rabbit holes that are interesting to, insiders. But
did you ultimately feel like it was a gift that you got cut from 10 to 4?
Yes, because people have responded to it because they can binge it so much faster. And there was the 2 episodes I would have done if we had 6. I would have done a deeper dive into Marjorie Dale Armstrong and her mental illness, because that was fascinating, and also Bill Rothstein.
Right.
Just their characters were.
Now, just for those who haven't seen it yet, explain those two people a little bit.
Sure. So, and this was another reason why I wanted to do the documentary finally, even though it was very confusing and complicated, was because it involved this character that a pop sugar writer called revoltingly magnetic. Marjorie Dale Armstrong, and I had seen the Grey Gardens documentary from remember the Beals, and they were just, and she reminded me of them, like just talking and like as if she existed in fully functional in the real world, right? And she didn't. She had a mental illness. She was brilliant, but had all these issues, and she was either she or Bill Rothstein. I like to call him her jilted lapdog lover. And
yeah,
she was
because she
that's
had a
pretty much what he
relationship
was,
with him, right?
Yeah.
And he wanted a relationship with her.
Yes,
Clearly.
engaged twice. He put an ad in the paper. We looked for it for we had a researcher looking for months, but we didn't find it. But remember the old want ads in the paper, like, oh, I miss you, Margie, and please come back. He did that. They were engaged twice, and then it broke apart because she was so manic around him.
And so he wanted to do anything he could to ingratiate himself to her.
Yes, he wanted to impress her. He always wanted to be her knight in shining armor and save her. And I also think that, so Marjorie or Bill, they're most likely either the dual masterminds or one of them was the true mastermind. Still a mystery. We don't know for sure because both of them have died.
What is your strong
They
suspicion?
died with the lie. Boy, I used to think it was Marjorie, and now I think it was the two of them, and I think they went back and forth. I think at one time Marjorie was saying, I want this money, I want to get people back. There were other co-conspirators involved. See how it gets so deep and crazy, but she wanted to get one of the other co-conspirators back for revenge and wanted to set him up. But then Bill might have stepped up and said, okay, no, I'll take care of it. I'll make sure we do this. I think they went back and forth. And in the end, it was their confluence that created this one-of-a-kind crime.
That's what I said to Heather before you came in. That is their toxic combination that, because there is that question of who spurred who to do it. But I think it was that
What do you guys think? What was your sense after watching it that who you thought was the mastermind?
Her.
Yeah.
But maybe it's because there's a little bit more of her in it. Like you said, if there was a little bit of a deeper dive into him, because he was a very smart man, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know.
I mean,
he made the bomb.
Heather's so right. I mean, he was a degreed physicist or some crap, or engineer or whatever.
He had an electrical engineering degree. Yeah. He spoke a couple different languages. But he never, as his best friend said, he wasn't a finisher. He started taking flying lessons and he never finished. And so this was this his swan song to impress the world after everybody had called him a loser his whole life?
The note I see, I feel like he wrote the scavenger hunt.
Yeah.
I don't know. I never have wavered from.
Yeah, I felt like she was the big think person, perhaps, and he was the detail guy.
Somebody said after the trial, one of her distant cousins said, it couldn't be Marjorie. She can't even organize her sock drawer. But then again, could it also have been Floyd Stockton, who was one of the other co-conspirators, who was this Bill Rothstein's roommate, who was the guy who actually latched the bomb around Brian's neck and got full immunity. So it's another.
No, but this is all interesting. And what's interesting as you're talking and we're talking about these different people is it almost doesn't matter. This isn't one of those stories where I can think of one thing that maybe I'd not want to talk about, but apart from that, you can speak about all these characters because it's the way the story is woven together. So you see the way they interlock, and even as you say, when you ask us, who do you think is a mastermind? At the end of it all, even after it's woven together for you, it's still an interpretive art as to what happened.
And that to me is what stands out about it as a story. And that usually, I think the thing that appeals, like my wife is very into, she's a murder enthusiast too.
Good phrase.
But I feel like part of why she likes it is the justice aspect of it.
Thank you.
She likes that the end wraps up. These people usually go to jail for the rest of their lives, or if there's a resolution and justice usually added. And I think that's part of the appeal. And in this one, it's like the story itself is the sort of beautiful object,
Thank you. Can I quote you?
Please.
Press material. But it was also important for us to move the story forward because in episode 4, which is what Mark was alluding to as the spoiler, we do reveal new information that the FBI was unable to get. And it shifts the case in another direction.
Now, I've listened to a handful of true crime podcasts, and as you know, I'm sure the Golden State Killer caught, right?
Yeah.
But with a light shining on these in this sort of way, I feel like perhaps new information does come up and you could have a second round, if you will.
And technically, even though the case is closed, there is no statute of limitations on murder. Right. So any of the surviving co-conspirators, and it's one or two depending on how you define them, they could still be charged with murder if the state police decide to move forward, if the DA wants to get involved. And we have not heard from anybody yet that's happening.
Have you heard from anybody?
Well, we've heard from. I've been in touch with. We had a consultant from the state police, Dave Gluth, who worked with us extensively, and he's kept his ear to the ground. And there's some rumbling that something may happen. Which season 2.
Because that excites me when people finally are like, oh, I do know something about this. Like the Tara Grimstead, I don't know if I'm saying her last name right.
Yeah, the Grim Sleeper, right? No,
it was the Payne Lindsay did that podcast in Atlanta.
Oh, right.
The
woman,
got it. The teacher that had been,
right.
They didn't even have her body. And then all of a sudden, after this podcast starts airing, people start talking on social media, and they ended up catching the people.
And we're keeping track of all the people that are, their comments on YouTube, their comments on our Facebook and our Twitter. And we are finding people now that are not coming out of the woodwork, but slowly but surely. Like one guy, just this morning, actually, I was looking on Twitter, and one guy said, I was the guy that Brian delivered to before he made his last delivery. And I know, and he was acting really funny. So just interesting information like that.
Sure.
Coming up, I'd like to get to the bottom of the remaining questions for me. Even though it's over and I've been working on this for 5 years and I've never worked on one project so long, I still really want to know who for sure wrote those notes, who decided to make that bomb live, because they could have done it without the live bomb.
Right.
And what happened to the second pizza delivery guy? Was that really an overdose? I mean, 2 days after one pizza guy dies, a second one from the same shop is found dead, and so a lot of mysteries left. Would love to.
They find a body. There's a body, a frozen
body. Oh my God! Yeah, we didn't even talk about the body.
Which is how it all started.
And that's introduced right away. Like they tell you. And by the way, there's a frozen.
Weinstein calls it in.
There's literally a person frozen in a freezer in the back of. It was in Rothstein's garage,
which was right next to the tower site where the last pizza delivery happened.
Yeah,
but that was another one of those wait what moments. Like, first of all, the bomb locking around somebody's neck is a one wait what moment, but then you get probably the strangest in my entire career, the strangest 911 call I've ever heard, where somebody says, "Hey, you might want to come over here. I got a body in the freezer, and you might want to arrest this woman." And then they ask him who's the caller, and he's like, "Never mind. It's none of your." He was playing with these people from day one.
You do get a sense that he feels, and this I think you actually explicitly state in the documentary, that he's playing with the authorities, that he feels as though they can't touch him because he's so much smarter than they are. Well, and there might be
the narcissism that goes through this entire pack of people is the toxic ingredient. It seems like
And it's not that we called them evil geniuses, because I think a lot of it was they just got lucky.
Right.
But and Marjorie called herself. She says, "I'm not some evil genius," which is how we got the title. But you got to wonder about these people. Were they? Was your impression that they were that clever, or was your impression that they did get lucky and things?
No, my impression was that there were, there might have been above average intelligence at play at the top of the pyramid, but it was so clouded by mental illness.
Yeah.
It was like Unabomber genius. Where it's like it's so clouded by mental illness and so convoluted at that point that the intelligence is a poison too, because it's just feeding the mental illness.
Yep. Yep. They played off each other. And here's some insider information. The very first time that Bill Rothstein was brought in to talk, one of the troopers said, "Hey, let's order some food. Anybody, and they were. Bill Rothstein, according to one of the law investigators, pulled out his wallet and went through the money. He said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I don't have any money." He goes, "Guess we're not going to get any pizza."
Yeah.
I mean, how,
he's
that's
really
so...
it's like an FU. Like, wow. I mean...
there's so much sadism involved in the whole thing.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Josh is right. I mean, as you said, Barbara, you didn't have to make that a real bomb.
Yeah.
That is sadistic, right? I mean, there's a heavy undertow of sadism through everything.
Yeah.
And we learn, you talk about her mental illness, as the documentary episodes unfold, you really get a window into her mental illness, into her ramblings, into the manic quality of her thoughts. But what was interesting to me, and what made it even more intriguing, was that you as producers and documentarians had a relationship with her. What's his name?
My co-producer, Trey.
Yeah.
Trey
so he's connected to her. She felt like emotionally bonded to him.
And I felt I felt that came across very well too.
Yeah. And what a unique, that that was one of the main things that interested me in telling this story, was because you always look for a good vehicle to tell the story. And in this case, it was his relationship with this woman who was possibly the mastermind. I'd never seen that before. And he stuck with her and talked to her almost, daily at times, just in case she would tell the truth. And she verbally assaulted him. And at one point would say evil things like, "I'm going to sue your effing balls off." And then in another phone call would say, "Love you, Trey." But he hung with her for all these years to try to get, and she died without ever saying, "Yes, it was me," or "I wrote the notes," or "billed it." But,
I like how you almost go into her voice every time you quote her. You get so close to actually doing Marjorie.
It's easy to do.
But
especially when you live with people for that long.
She's in my head.
For sure.
Yeah.
But as we learn, her male friends, husbands, etc., don't tend to do too well over the long term.
Right? They don't last very long.
Right. I mean, literally.
Yeah. In fact, Dave Gluth, the trooper, he was in the car with her at one point, and they were going around to the different sites asking her, "Where were you? What happened?" And she was talking to him a lot. And one of the other officers noted, "Hey, she seems to have taken a liking to you, Dave." And Dave actually turned around to Marjorie and said, "No offense, Marjorie, but it seems like guys you take a liking to don't last very long." Yeah. So,
what was her response?
She loved it. She loved it when people took her to task. When she went to prison for the murder of the guy in the freezer, who it turns out was her boyfriend that she had shot. And again, crazy story. But when she went to prison, a very an inmate with a lot of bravado walked up to her and said, "Hey, it doesn't pay to piss off the freezer queen. You end up an entree." And then Marjorie looked at her and started laughing. So it was interesting, her dynamic. When people would hold her accountable, she would like to play at that level as opposed to...
She made a comment to an inmate as well, something about, I killed my first husband, I killed my second husband, or whatever. I mean, she kind of was almost bragging about, look, I can kill you and get away with it. I killed this guy, I killed that guy, so don't F with me.
But the other thing about your story there is that that's another narcissism trait.
Yes,
is that they can be self-aware and they can have a sense of humor about themselves as long as it's about them.
She was a shapeshifter, and that's what made her so intriguing, but so off-putting as well. And she was entertaining. And that interview that you see with her, that's the only on-camera interview ever done with Marjorie Dale Armstrong. There were little snippets, in between court sessions and perp walks and that sort of thing, but we really wanted to get an interview with her.
How did you?
We used an old investigative technique that shall remain a secret.
Oh, okay.
But you'll notice, I'll give you a hint, you'll notice that it was an attorney and it was a client-attorney conversation. Right off the bat, when we started that interview, which was, by the way, supposed to be 20 minutes, she was in prison in Erie and we were here in Beverly Hills. And the attorney, right off the bat, said, "This could end up on TV, and this is not going to be private. This is not attorney-client. I'm not your attorney yet. I'm just listening to your case." And she says, "That's okay. I'll talk to I'm doing the voice. That's okay. I'll talk to anybody. I'm innocent." And we were able to use that.
Wow.
It's really great. And again, it's like the off-used parallel, but it is peeling away the layers of the onion. Yeah. I mean, it really is well done. And as Josh says, you have all of this stuff. It's kind of a complicated story, and you'd sit there, I'm sure, with these storyboards and connecting like some kind of police crime board.
I went through so many index cards, I started cutting them in half to have.
Yeah, I believe it.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Had you, prior to this, done a story like this? I mean, I knew you.
Yes,
what's your background
similar.
then?
And in fact, that's how Trey came to me, because he brought me this whole forest of what do I do with this? And he needed perspective, and that's what I gave to him, and somebody to put it together and write it and direct it. But I had done a documentary in 2010 that was called Tall Hot Blonde. Have any of you ever heard of that one? Small, very small. It was.
I have heard of it, but that may have just been because I knew it was yours. I never saw it though.
And that was my first one. I wrote, edited on my computer, and it ended up doing really well in film festivals. And Paramount bought it which was wow.
How cool is that?
But the story, again, it was the story that was so great. It involved an unusual female. I can spoil it for you and tell you what it's about in one sentence, or not. Do you want to?
Sure.
Yeah.
Keep the conversation.
I'll still watch it.
Okay, so it's a cat. You know what catfishing is, right? Sure. Catfishing story. It's to this day, it's still the ultimate. I don't think anybody's ever had this kind of catfishing happen, but it basically involves a mother who is bored with her life, and she poses and uses her daughter's pictures online. Poses as her daughter.
Oh, wait a minute. I did see
that. Yeah. Well, and then after the documentary came out, I got a phone call that Courtney Cox wanted to direct a film version of it. And I thought, which one of my friends is calling and punking me about this? But she really loved the documentary, and she directed the film narrative version for Lifetime.
I saw the documentary, and it also is riveting.
It's got those moments where it's a level above just general crime, general horrible murder. It's like there's an extra twist.
Yeah, and you take us through those beats of that story, and get us to a payoff.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that it's interactive, because I want people to play Clue and figure all the things out that we can't figure out.
So on the strength of that, you're saying, by the way, isn't it how great is it that you do this homegrown thing, like edited and everything in our house, and then Paramount buys it? I mean,
and I can't advocate that enough. And Mark Duplass and Jay Duplass work like that too. Like they did a lot of stuff on their own, indie, and then they went into the studio system. This is all in his book that he wrote with his brother. And they didn't like all the controls and the rules, and they came back out into the indie system. So I really, whenever I get
myself out of show business for the same sort of thing. Yes.
And what, do you find more satisfaction?
Absolutely.
Right.
A lot less money, but a lot more. The last 10 years have been all sort of self-generated stuff, and it's been the best 10 years.
And what
of
are the
my...
documentaries? Let's plug those.
The one that's out right now is called I Need You to Kill. It's about
it's
about stand-up comedy in Asia.
Yeah.
As seen through 3 American comics who go over to these scenes.
What a great line.
And the other one is a bio-doc about an actor and singer named Michael DeBar.
It's so good.
This crazy 50-year journey through show business.
It's so good.
That's not out yet, but I'll send you a link.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. I'll give you a review.
Did you, just on this point about studios and all this sort of thing and the creative process, did you get tons of notes from Netflix or Duplass, or who was tweaking from a creative standpoint the most?
You mean Noteflix? Or no?
Is that right?
No. We started calling them that, but we loved getting notes, because Mark was like our first level of, okay, guys, this is down the rabbit hole. Try this, try that, but just very few. He was very light-handed and he just believed, and he would tell me, just go back in, try another iteration, try another version, and he was always right, to have faith. And then we would give the cuts each episode to Netflix, and you get 4 rounds with them. So they get to 4 times they get to tell you, do this, do that, don't do that. And to their credit, their notes were spectacular, because they were fresh eyes and they were able to help keep the train on the track. But also to their credit, there would be instances like where I'd be like, I've got this scene where this one spider is going after another spider, and I want to use it. I want to use that video right before Marjorie and the prostitute face off. And they're like, oh, it might be a little, on the nose. I'm like, no, it's right before. And they're like, okay, use it. So it was, I can't tell you how great it was, because when you're used to working by yourself, it's great to get input from people who are talented and who are they're on your team. They just want to help it get better. So
when you're working by yourself, are you one of those people who, as you get it, you get drunk on your own stuff in the extreme, or do you go the other way, which is, I hate all this now?
No, weirdly, that's happened on other projects, but it did not happen on this project, and I'm surprised I'm still not sick of it now, because I've been living with it for 5 years. But we still want to keep going a little bit. But there are magical moments, and this from when the right voiceover, the right soundbite, the right music, and the right visuals come together. It's just like the angels are singing. Right. And it's like, this is a great way to communicate to somebody on all those levels, emotion and weirdness, and come into the story and help solve it.
Yeah, it's very satisfying, just because, like having written scripts, that's just like such a small part of the final thing. So in the way that documentary making is writing in its way, that when you're done writing, the whole thing is there.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because each choice you're making is the writing of a doc, but then it's like there in front of you, playing the way it's going to play.
And I did have a student ask me recently. I did a little speech at a little event, and a student asked me, like, what's the best way to write, and how many times did you write this? And I told her, learn how to edit, and don't write a script until after you've put everything in your timeline and moved it around and write in your timeline.
Right.
That was finally our my best move was to put it in there and let it breathe, and then bring in a really great. We had this editor, Alex Calleros, talk about fresh eyes, and he was just like, let's try this, let's try that, and I really enjoyed the rhythm of working with a professional editor.
Well, but you did the first cut yourself?
Yeah, I'd give him my cheesy cuts, right. And I'd take an XML out of Final Cut, give it to him, and then he had to translate it into Adobe, which was a little bit of those two systems didn't talk that well to each other, but we worked it out. We found a working path, and he was able to absolutely up the value.
Cool. It is a challenge. I was thinking, it's just so neat you said this, right as I was thinking it.
Yeah.
It's a challenge without narration to have the story driven forward just by those things that are said in interviews, and I mean it's another level of challenge.
Yeah.
And yet it moves along seamlessly. I mean,
you didn't narrate. There was no narration, was there?
Well, we started off with, at the very beginning, you'll hear this, a voice of God saying, "Marjorie Dale Armstrong, there's 3 things you should know about her," and then we dip back into the narrator at the very end of part 1, and then I worked him in parts 3 and 4, because that's when it really becomes his journey. Part 1 is about this heist, and that's so riveting. You don't need anybody telling it because you can see it. Show don't tell. Part 2 is about the frozen body, and then part 3 and 4 are about the investigation and the cat and mouse game, and that's where Trey gets involved. And that was wonderful to have his viewpoint and his narration to guide us through. I mean, how often can a citizen journalist get in the middle of a case? And he was talking to Marjorie Dale Armstrong when the FBI couldn't, because she was off limits to them. So.
Yeah, it didn't feel like narration because it was him.
Okay.
It was him, and he had the relationship.
Yeah.
So, I didn't even think of it as narration, but I guess it was in that sense, yeah. 2 questions. One is, before I ask you about what you're going to do, what you're on to, tell me about the Netflix thing. They can tell you sort of how, almost like ratings, how you're doing, or do you care?
They won't tell you a thing.
They don't release any numbers.
They don't, but they did. They were really great. They called us 4 or 5 days after it launched, and it's no longer a premiere, it's a launch. They called us afterwards, after those first 4 days, and they said, "Thank you so much, it's performing really well." And then we did have an insider who knows somebody at Netflix claiming that it was streamed within the first 5 days millions of times, and it's so grateful to hear that people are following it all the way through. That's, please watch the whole thing to get the whole.
It's pretty hard to not watch the whole thing, I have to say.
Is it called sticky?
It's very sticky.
Once you are in, man, you are way in. And that depends on what. In television, you can do a great show, but if they park you on a Friday night at 9 o'clock, for example, you're done.
Yeah.
Now, with Netflix, it's different, but I also would think it does depend on positioning. In other words, is there a promotional or a positional aspect to a Netflix release that's important?
Yeah, and timing too. They look at lulls. I'm guessing, I don't know this for sure, but my hunch is that they look at vacation times. That's when you can release sticky multi-part series like this, and their promotional team blew me away. Like, they were amazing. They got us on talk shows, and surprisingly, we did on my last film, I did a lot of typical interviews, like talk shows and stuff, and newscasts, like we used to work on, Mark. But with Netflix, for the promotion of this, we did more podcasts and streaming stuff, and far fewer. It's changed. The landscape has changed for promotion.
Right.
And I have to tell you, it's grassroots. I think Netflix relies on grassroots interest. Within 3 or 4 days, Chrissy Teigen she's got like 10.7 million followers or something. And thank God she didn't have her baby before Evil Genius, because she was sitting around looking for something to watch. And 4 days later had her baby after we launched. But she tweeted to watch it, and that's when we really blew up. So Chrissy Teigen,
amazing?
thank you.
Blessed are the tastemakers.
But that's just like right there, that just kind of goes to show why these people like her and the Kardashians get so much money for each ad. And
absolutely,
because I mean, that's insane that she can move the needle that much on a true crime documentary.
Look, it's not so unlike what they have done for years, where they get celebrity spokespeople for everything from beer to cosmetics to whatever. But
but the celebrity controls the distribution of their word.
No, but it's true. But I'm just saying that still, you need a high-profile person out front of whatever, even if it's a tweet.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's a reason there's publicists, for sure.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
People have to hear about it.
And when it happens organically like that, people trust that. They're like, this is not coming from a PR agency or an ad.
So. That's exactly right. So So what are you doing now? What is next?
Well, there's talk of maybe a feature film, so I'm getting out all those old index cards for all those great emotional moments that I couldn't, like there are a lot of scenes that I would have loved, and in fact we did shoot a few to recreate them for the documentary, and then they just started looking a little...
On that point, I love the recreation of moments or scenarios without a recre kind of thing, meaning with actors and everything. You do it in a very creative way. I don't want to spoil it for people. I just like it.
Thank you. And that was my goal. I'm like, we're not doing a typical, like a TV show, like a 48 hours. We're not going to do those kind of recreations. So, but thank you that.
So there's
talk
of a feature film.
Yeah, and I also about 5 years ago wrote a book with a guy named Clark Fogg, who is the head CSI guy at the Beverly Hills Police Department. And we wrote a book called Beverly Hills Confidential, A Century of Stars, Scandals, and Murders. And yes, I like long titles. And that chronicles the first 100 years of crime and drama and scandal in Beverly Hills. So
you have to come. I'll read that book, and you have to come back and talk about that. Heather, will you come back down for that?
Yeah, of course.
I mean, seriously, that could be great.
Like a true Hollywood Babylon?
The book, right. We right all the wrongs. So that book is out, and we're talking about turning that into a series or a podcast or something. So, Mark, I'll need to ask you how to do podcasts.
Well, I don't know if I want to ask. There's certainly enough people to. Everybody's got one. You can ask almost anybody about how to do podcasts.
Have you ever taken? I doubt it. Or any of you, the Dearly Departed tour in Hollywood?
Yes.
You have?
Yes.
So you know.
And we've worked with him.
Brian.
Yeah.
He's great. That tour is great. But
Isn't it fun?
It takes you to where all these salacious Hollywood murders and or deaths.
Yeah.
It's not like you go to a cemetery. I mean, you go...
Right.
Oh, it's fascinating.
I got to do that. Josh,
have you done
that?
It's so fun.
No, I haven't.
That would be a fun activity for us to do together.
Let's bring some mics.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
That would be good.
It's so fun.
I'd love your take on that. That'd be fun to hear you.
Come on, field trip, come on.
This murder would be great. We got to pitch Barbara Schroeder.
And I am actively looking for our next evil genius. Not necessarily, doesn't have to be a bank heist, but
You probably won't have to look very hard. People are coming to you now.
They are, and I'm turning people away. I'm always saying, we need a twist. We need something beyond just, something.
I was having lunch with all of your friends, mostly Mark's friend Josh Minkowitz.
Josh, love Josh. Yeah.
And talking about what's the perfect story for a Dateline where it's like it's something that broke locally but not nationally. So these things that make it
such a
that
good
perfect
job.
story.
Yeah. He does a good job. And it's funny. I thought of him earlier when you were talking about all the jurisdictions and the different people and agencies involved in trying to handle this case. Because we asked Josh, I think he was a guest here, about...
He was like one of our very first guests.
Yeah, he was. That's right. He was like episode 3 or something.
The one I listened to,
Oh, it was great.
We asked, what's the perfect murder? Like, and how do you plan the perfect murder? And essentially, apart from all the, first you get the formaldehyde or whatever it is, he was saying, really, the reason these cases oftentimes don't get solved is because of jurisdictional issues.
Yeah.
They'll find a leg in... L.A. County, and then they'll find another limb up in Lancaster, and those two agencies don't work together, and then they get proprietary or they get really possessive about solving the crime.
Interdepartmental drama.
And that's exactly what happened here on some level, too.
Yeah.
Wow, I just loved it, and I'm so glad that you're associated with this thing that I thought was just so terrific.
I'm so pleased to talk about it. It is still. I wonder when I'm going to get tired of talking about it, but maybe when it's solved.
After putting in all that time and feeling proud at the end is always a great thing, and it's a great piece.
Well, and we feel like we were able to. I mean, this is going to sound a little lofty, but this poor guy who died. I mean, and his name is so muddied. And the fact that we do reveal something in episode 4 that might actually clear him, we see that as a second chance at justice. So that's the reason for doing this. It was the reason for doing Tall Hot Blonde. Like, let's add some justice to these stories.
Well, it's funny, just on that point, the family, as I recall, was suing or there was certainly controversy. The family was arguing that law enforcement waited too long, that they essentially killed their...
Yeah, they were very upset, and I talked with them for quite a while and wanted to get them to work with us, and they just had media fatigue, and they were just like, we're done, and nobody's listening to us, our brother's innocent, and I would love to find out if I'm sure they've seen it, but I'd love to find out their reaction, because a lot of the things they were saying all these years, we have proven to be true, so I hope they're happy. And Brian's mother is still alive.
And see, I feel like that's the kind of thing that I was referencing earlier, where not coming out of the woodwork, but all of a sudden, like, things start floating to the top.
Yeah.
You're certainly, at the end of it all, you're quite sympathetic. I don't even think you need to wait to the end, but I'm just saying that he's a sympathetic character. You realize that he's just a pawn in this whole thing. He's a hapless kind of guy who gets caught up in it, I think.
Although some people still think.
Well, I was just saying maybe. You're not. I don't think that's so resolute. Even though I'm not going to spoil it, but I don't know.
It's called Evil Genius: The True Story of America's Most Diabolical Bank Heist. Barbara Schroeder, congratulations.
Thank you for watching. Streaming on Netflix now.
It's on Netflix, yeah. And we'll have it'll all be on our website, too, if you want information on the show and everything. It'll be on our website, edge-show.com. Can people contact you somehow?
Yeah, we have a Facebook, we have a Twitter, so...
Okay. So the Twitter is Evil Genius, or what?
Yep.
Or is it? Okay.
But it's the Netflix Evil Genius.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, good. All right.
It's not the one called Sexy Evil Genius, by the way. It's just
I was about
Evil
to
Genius.
say, I can't believe Evil Genius wasn't taken on Twitter.
Exactly.
Hence the long title.
Any other questions for the witness before I excuse? No? All right.
Are you born and raised in L.A.?
No, I was raised in Ohio.
Oh, but you, I mean,
Small
just
town.
to follow up.
Yeah.
As I recall, you're in the movie Roger and Me. Am I wrong?
Yes,
Yeah.
Michael Moore. I worked in Flint, Michigan. I was the news anchor there. And Michael Moore was busy doing his stuff, and he asked me to do a stand-up for him to recreate a news story that had happened. So that was my first foray into the world of television.
And when we worked together in local news in Los Angeles, and I remember that was a big thing. Barbara Schroeder, she was in Roger and Me. She was in Roger. Yeah. So.
Well, and I remember coming to Fox and working with Mark, and Mark was a big deal because he was this, well-known San
He's an
Francisco
American
guy.
president.
Yeah. And the best voice in broadcasting, I contend.
Oh, so sweet. It's
the best voice in podcasting, at least.
And now in podcasting.
And now. So excited to have you here, and thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you guys.
Yeah.
Hope you enjoyed our conversation. You can reach us directly by email. The address is edgewithmarkthompson@gmail.com. You can also leave a comment on the website, edge-show.com. And thank you for supporting our show. Until next time, bye-bye.
If you enjoy listening to The Edge, support them by subscribing to The Edge on iTunes, Stitcher, and you can listen through the iHeartRadio app. Get busy listening.
Hi, it's Robin Super here. Listen to past episodes and subscribe on iTunes and Stitcher to get future episodes. Or check out their website, edge-show.com.